Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard. In our previous episode, we discussed how to build a player development system. We explored why successful programs don't simply develop players, they build systems that make development intentional, measurable, and sustainable. Today's conversation builds directly on that foundation because once you have established how your players will develop, the next question becomes what style of basketball gives your program the greatest chance to win? Notice, I didn't ask what offense do you like. I asked what offense gives your program the greatest chance to win. Those are two completely different questions. One of the biggest mistake I see, especially among young coaches, it is falling in love with an offensive system before understanding the environment they are coaching in. A coach attends a coaching clinic, watches a successful NCAA team, studies an NBA offense, or sees a EuroLeague concept online. They return home excited and immediately decide that's the offense we're gonna run. But great head coaches don't begin with plays. They begin with questions. If I accepted a university head coaching position tomorrow, I wouldn't spend my first week drawing offensive sets. I would spend studying it. I would study my conference. I would study my opponents. I would study my own roster. Only then would I begin designing an offensive identity. But why? Because offensive identity is not about preference. It's about solving competitive problems. Let's imagine you have just accepted your first head coaching position. For your first official practice, I want you to answer four questions. First, what league are you coaching in? Every conference has its own personality. Some conferences are physical, some play with tremendous pace, others rely heavily on half court execution, some recruit elite athletes, others develop players over 4 or 5 years. Some conferences are dominated by experienced senior heavy rosters, and others are consistently rebuilding through transfers. So, understanding your league is the first responsibility of a head coach. I would spend hours watching games from previous season, not just championship games, games throughout the year. I would ask myself, who consistently finishes near the top of the standings? What offensive systems do they use? How do they create advantages? Where do most of their points come from? Do they dominate in transition? Do they score through the post? Do they rely on ball screens? How many three-point attempts do they take? Or how deep are their rotations? Perhaps the most important question is, why are they winning? Not what offense they are running. Why does that offense work in this conference? That's where real learning begins. Now comes the second question. Can I realistically beat those teams by playing exactly the same way? Many coaches instinctively answer yes. I often answer no. If the strongest program in your conference recruits the best athletes every year, has greater resources, more depth, and years of continuity, why would you try to beat them by playing their style of basketball? That doesn't mean you ignore successful programs. It means you study them carefully. Then you ask a different question. Where is the opportunity? Perhaps every top team in your conference plays two rotational post players. Maybe they're outstanding around the basket but struggle defending in space. That changes the conversation. Instead of trying to outmuscle them, perhaps your advantage is creating more space, playing with greater pace, and forcing those post players to defend actions they are uncomfortable guarding. Or maybe the conference has shifted heavily toward 5 out basketball. Well, everybody wants to spread the floor, everybody wants to shoot threes, everybody wants to play fast. Perhaps your opportunity isn't to join the trend. Perhaps it's to recruit two highly skilled interior players capable of dominating the paint while everyone else is built to defend the perimeter. Championship coaches don't automatically follow trends. They understand trends, then they decide whether to embrace them or attack them. That's a strategical thinking. The third question is just as important. Who are my players? I always smile when I hear a coach say, "This is my offense." Well, my response is usually, "Really? Or is it the offense your current roster allows you to play?" Let's consider very different teams. Team A has a dynamic point guard who thrives in transition, four players who can shoot from the perimeter, and a center who is mobile enough to pass, screen, and make decisions away from the basket. Well, immediately several offensive possibilities become available. You might consider a five-out alignment. You might use continuous ball screen actions. You might emphasize pace and early offense and constant spacing. Now consider Team B. Your point guard is an excellent organizer, but not particularly explosive. Your center is a 6'10" powerful around the rim and one of the best offensive rebounders in the conference. And your power forward scores effectively on a block but rarely shoots beyond 15 feet. Should these two teams run the same offense? Well, absolutely not. And this is where I believe many coaches make one of their biggest mistakes. They become committed to a system rather than committed to maximizing their personnel. An offensive identity should never force players to fit the offense. The offense should maximize the strengths of the players while minimizing their weaknesses. That doesn't mean we ignore long-term development. Well, episode 10 reminded us that development remains a priority, but development and winning must work together. If I inherit two dominant interior players, I'm not I'm not abandoning them simply because 5-5 basketball is popular. Instead, I'll ask, how can I build an offense that allows these players to influence winning while continuing to expand their skill sets over time? Well, that's the responsibility of a head coach, isn't it? I want you to take this one challenge. Before you're opening your playbook, before installing your first offensive action, before deciding whether you are a 5-out team or a 4-out 1-in team or a 3-out 2-in team, answer these three questions honestly. What does it take to win my conference? What does my current roster do exceptionally well? Where can my program create a competitive advantage that other teams aren't expecting? Because your offensive identity should never begin with a clipboard. It should begin with understanding the competitive landscape you are preparing to conquer. Now, so far we have discussed why offensive identity should never begin with a playbook. It begins with understanding your competitive environment, studying your conference, evaluating your personnel, and identifying the competitive advantage your program can create. Now comes the second one. Every head coach eventually has the answer. What offensive system gives my team the best opportunity to succeed? Notice I didn't say which offense is the best. There isn't one. Every offensive system is just simply a tool. Like any tool, its value depends on when, where, and how it is used. Well, let's begin with one of the most common systems in modern basketball, the 5-out offense. 5-out basketball has become increasingly popular because of the space it creates. With all five players positioned around the perimeter, driving lanes become larger, help defenders must cover more ground, and the game places greater value on decision making than on memorizing plays. Perfect. However, coaches often misunderstand why 5-out works. It doesn't work because all five players stand outside the 3-point line. It works because all five players are capable of making basketball decisions. Well, can your center handle the ball under pressure? Can they make the next pass? Can they attack at closeout? Can they read the help side defense? If the answer is consistently no, then simply placing them on the perimeter doesn't create better offense. It just creates longer passes and more turnovers. Well, 5-out basketball demands versatile players. It also demands patience. If your program cannot consistently recruit or develop versatile frontcourt players, forcing a five-out identity may limit your team's success rather than improve it. Now let's consider another system, the 4-out 1A. Well, if I were starting a university program from scratch, this is probably where I would begin. Not because it's fashionable, because it offers tremendous flexibility. A traditional post player still provides an interior scoring, screening, and offensive rebounding, while four perimeter players create spacing and multiple driving opportunities. This system allows you to play through your post when you have an advantage. It also allows you to spread the floor when your guards create advantages off the dribble. And more importantly, it adapts well to a different personnel. Your post player might be a dominant low post scorer. Next year, they might become a stretch five. Principles remain largely the same. The actions simply evolve. For many university programs, especially those experiencing roster changes every year, adaptability is one of the greatest strengths of a 4-out system. Now let's talk about something many coaches have abandoned too quickly. The 3-out, 2-in offense. Some coaches immediately dismiss the 3-out basketball as outdated. Well, I think that's a mistake. Imagine your roster includes two outstanding post players. One is an exceptional low post scorer, the other one is an elite passer capable of playing from the high post. Would I move both players away from the basket simply because modern basketball favors spacing? Absolutely not. Instead, I would ask how to maximize their strengths. A skilled high-low combination can create tremendous pressure on defenses, dominate offensive rebounding, control the paint, and force opponents into foul trouble. If your conference lacks size, a well-designed three-out offense may actually become your competitive advantage. Again, the lesson is simple. Don't choose an offense because it is popular. Choose it because it gives your player the greatest opportunity to succeed. Well, this leads to another important question. Can one team play multiple offensive systems? In my opinion, yeah. In fact, many successful programs already do. Basketball is becoming increasingly positionless, but it is also becoming increasingly adaptable. Suppose your starting lineup includes a traditional center. You may begin the game in a 4-out 1-in alignment. Later, your backup center enters the game. They are more mobile, can shoot from the perimeter, or being able to dribble off the dribble and create more opportunities and make excellent decisions as a passer. Well, without changing your philosophy, your spacing can naturally evolve into a 5-out structure. Now imagine you're protecting a lead late in the fourth quarter. You want to dominate the offensive glass and control the tempo. Well, perhaps you return to a 3-out 2-in alignment to create more interior presence. The offensive identity remains the same. The alignment changes to solve the demands of the moment. And that's an important distinction. Great coaches build principles. Average coaches become attached to formations. Now, let's discuss recruiting. I believe recruiting and offensive identity should never be separated. One of the first questions I ask is, it is not who is the best player available. Instead, I ask, which player helps us become the team we are trying to build? Imagine your long-term vision is to play with exceptional pace and spacing. Then your recruiting priorities should include decision makers, versatile forwards, mobile post players, and guards who consistently create advantages. Now, on the other hand, if your vision is built around physical interior play, dominant rebounding, and half-court execution, your recruiting priorities will naturally look different. While neither philosophy is ultimately better. The question is whether your recruiting consistently supports your identity. If too many coaches recruit talented players without asking whether those players fit the basketball they intend to play. Well, talent is important, don't get me wrong, but fit is essential. Finally, I would like to discuss one mistake that I believe that many coaches make. They evaluate their offense almost entirely by points scored. I think that's too simplistic. Instead, I ask different questions. Did our offense consistently create high quality shots? Did we generate paint touches? Did we force defensive rotations? Did we create advantages through ball movement or player movement? Did our players make good decisions under pressure? Did our offensive identity remain recognizable when the first action broke down? Because those answers tell me much more about our offense than the final score alone. As we conclude today's episode, I would like to leave you with one final thought though. Your offensive identity is not your favorite play. It is not the latest trend, and it is not what another successful program happens to be running. Your offensive identity is the intersection of your philosophy, your personnel, your recruiting strategy, your development system, and the competitive demands of your conference. When those five elements align, your offense becomes much more than collection of actions. It becomes a competitive advantage. I will finish with a principle that has become part of my coaching philosophy. Don't build an offense that impresses the other coaches. Build an offense that consistently wins games with the players you have against the opponents you face in the league you compete in. Because championships are not won by running someone else's system. They are won by building one that belongs to your program. In our next episode, we will move to the other side of the basketball and answer another question every head coach must eventually confront. How do you design a defensive identity that gives your team a consistent competitive advantage? Because while offense may define your style, defense often defines your standards. And before our next episode, I want you to take 1 hour and complete these five exercises. Number one, scout your conference. Watch the top four teams from last season and identify their primary offensive system and why it works. Number two, evaluate your roster. List the strengths and limitations of every player, then ask which offensive system best maximizes those strengths. Number three, define your offensive principles. Before choosing plays, write down the five non negotiable principles your offense will always follow. For example, spacing, paint touches, decision making, ball movement, offensive rebounding. Number four, evaluate your recruiting. Ask yourself whether you're recruiting the best players available or the best players for the style of basketball you want to build. Number five, challenge your assumptions. If you were hired by a different school in a completely different conference tomorrow, would you still choose the same offensive system? If the answer is yes, ask yourself why. If the answer is no, you're beginning to think like a head coach rather than simply a play caller, sorry. I want you to remember this. An offensive system is easy to install. An offensive identity takes years to build. That's exactly why championship programs are intentional about every decision they make.